Summer's officially here, and the bikini sale at shackshop.us is happening right now. Get hot styles, bold prints, and perfect fits, all on sale for a limited time. Whether you're beach-bound or poolside, we've got the bikini that makes you feel confident, cute, and totally summer-ready. So don't wait. Head to shackshop.us and shop the sale before it ends. That's shackshop.us, your new favorite bikini spot.
When Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood in Munich, Germany, and declared that U.S. aid had enabled a genocide in Gaza, she wasn't merely offering a policy critique. She was deploying one of the most explosive accusations in modern political vocabulary, in a city forever etched into history as a cradle of the Nazi movement. Words matter, locations matter, timing matters. And when an American member of Congress accuses the world's only Jewish state of genocide while standing in the country where the Holocaust was launched, it is not just controversial, it is historically jarring, legally questionable, and politically combustible. This was not a casual remark in a hallway. It was delivered at the Munich Security Conference, one of the most prominent global forums for defense and foreign policy. Ocasio-Cortez invoked the Leahy Laws, argued that U.S. assistance to Israel should be conditioned, and declared that American aid had enabled a genocide. That accusation demands scrutiny, legal, moral, and political, because genocide is not a rhetorical flourish. It is a specific crime under international law. It is the deliberate attempt to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. It is the crime of Rwanda, the crime of Srebrenica, the crime of the Holocaust. To level that charge at Israel in the context of its war against Hamas is not simply to criticize military strategy, it is to allege the gravest conceivable criminal intent. And that is precisely why critics across the political and academic spectrum erupted. The weight of the word genocide. Under the 1948 UN Genocide Convention, genocide requires specific intent, dolus specialis, to destroy a protected group as such. Civilian casualties, even high numbers of civilian casualties, do not automatically constitute genocide. War, tragically, produces civilian deaths. The legal threshold is not many civilians died, it is demonstrable intent to eliminate a people. Israel's war in Gaza began after the October 7, 2023 massacre, when Hamas militants crossed into southern Israel, killing approximately 1,200 people and abducting more than 250. Entire families were slaughtered, civilians at a music festival were gunned down, elderly people were taken hostage, children were killed or kidnapped. Hamas is designated as a terrorist organization by the United States and the European Union. Israel responded with a military campaign aimed at dismantling Hamas's military capabilities and rescuing hostages. That campaign has resulted in significant destruction in Gaza and heavy civilian casualties, a reality Israel supporters acknowledge is tragic and devastating. But the legal question is not whether the war has been deadly. It is whether Israel is pursuing a policy of intentionally destroying Palestinians as a people. Numerous military historians and international law scholars argue the answer is no. They point to evacuation warnings, humanitarian corridors, Israel's stated war aims, defeating Hamas, not eradicating Palestinians. Reasonable people can debate tactics, proportionality, and strategic decisions. They can debate U.S. aid conditions. They can debate whether Israel's campaign has been too aggressive or insufficiently restrained. But genocide is not shorthand for a war I oppose. When Ocasio-Cortez used that term, she escalated the debate from policy disagreement to moral indictment. Munich, symbolism and historical blindness. Location is not neutral. Munich is where Adolf Hitler staged the beer hall push in 1923. It is where the Nazi movement took root. It is ground zero for the ideology that culminated in the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews. To stand in that city and accuse the Jewish state of genocide is to invite a collision of historical symbolism that cannot be ignored. No one suggests that Ocasio-Cortez intended to evoke Holocaust imagery, but public figures do not operate in a vacuum. Historical context matters, especially in Germany, where the legacy of Nazism is woven into national consciousness. Germany has been among Israel's strongest European supporters in recent decades, grounded in a post-Holocaust commitment to Jewish security. The German government has rejected formal genocide accusations against Israel. So has the United States government. When an American lawmaker levels that charge in Munich, critics see not just a policy critique, but a moral inversion, accusing Jews of committing the very crime historically committed against them. That is why the backlash was swift and fierce. The Leahy Laws in the aid debate. Ocasio-Cortez grounded her argument in the Leahy Laws, which prohibit U.S. assistance to foreign security force units when there is credible information of gross human rights violations. This is not a fringe legal concept, it is established U.S. law. Conditioning foreign aid is a legitimate policy debate, but there is a vast difference between arguing that aid should be conditioned and asserting that it has enabled genocide. One is a legal compliance question. The other is a moral condemnation of extraordinary magnitude. The Leahy framework requires investigation of specific units and credible allegations of abuses. It does not automatically equate civilian casualties in war with genocidal intent. Critics argue that Ocasio-Cortez blurred that distinction, turning a legal debate into an indictment that implies Israel is committing the crime of crimes. That rhetorical leap matters. The Hamas factor, context that cannot be ignored. Any serious analysis of Gaza must grapple with Hamas's strategy. Hamas embeds fighters within dense civilian populations. It operates from and under hospitals. It stores weapons in residential areas. It constructed an extensive tunnel network beneath urban infrastructure. Human rights organizations and war law scholars have long acknowledged that such tactics complicate proportionality assessments and increase civilian risk. This does not grant Israel carte blanche. International humanitarian law still applies. Civilian protection remains mandatory. But to assess Israel's conduct without acknowledging Hamas's tactics is to strip the conflict of its operational reality. Critics of Ocasio-Cortez argue that her remarks downplayed or omitted the initiating event, October 7th, and the operational environment Hamas created. Genocide implies a unilateral campaign to eliminate a people. The Israel-Hamas war is a bilateral armed conflict initiated by a terrorist organization that openly calls for Israel's destruction. Intent matters, context matters. The domestic political calculation. It would be naive to ignore the domestic political dimension. Within segments of the American left, the word genocide has become commonplace in describing Gaza. Campus protests have adopted the language. Progressive activists demand divestment and sanctions. The rhetoric has intensified over time.
For Ocasio-Cortez, whose political base includes activists deeply critical of Israeli policy, the genocide accusation aligns with a broader progressive framing. But international diplomacy is not campus activism. When a sitting member of Congress uses that language abroad, it reverberates beyond domestic political circles. It affects alliances, diplomatic messaging, and America's perceived reliability as a strategic partner. Foreign policy is not just about moral clarity, it is also about strategic coherence. The moral hazard of inflated language. The overuse of the term genocide carries its own moral cost. If every brutal war is genocide, then genocide becomes indistinguishable from war. The word loses its specificity. Its historical gravity erodes. The Holocaust was genocide. Rwanda was genocide. Srebrenica was genocide. To apply the same term to every high-casualty conflict risks diluting the meaning of the word, and paradoxically, diminishing the singular horror of actual extermination campaigns. Critics argue that Ocasio-Cortez's language contributes to that dilution. That does not mean civilian suffering in Gaza is trivial. It is not. Civilian deaths are tragic and devastating. But moral seriousness requires precision. America's strategic interests. Beyond legal definitions lies a strategic question. What does it mean for U.S. lawmakers to publicly accuse an ally of genocide? Israel is America's closest partner in the Middle East. It shares intelligence, cooperates militarily, and serves as a counterweight to Iran and its proxies. Conditioning aid is one debate. Labeling Israel genocidal is another. If the U.S. government formally adopted that position, it would trigger legal and diplomatic consequences of enormous scale. Sanctions, arms embargoes, and international isolation would follow. No U.S. administration, Republican or Democratic, has reached that conclusion. When individual lawmakers move ahead of their own government's legal position, it complicates diplomacy. The politics of outrage. The backlash to Ocasio-Cortez was intense, especially among conservatives who viewed her remarks as reckless and historically tone-deaf. Some critics framed her comments as emblematic of a broader progressive hostility toward Israel. Others accused her of pandering to activist audiences at the expense of factual rigor. Supporters counter that she is raising urgent human rights concerns and challenging unconditional aid policies. The divide reflects a deeper polarization in American politics over Israel, a shift that has accelerated in recent years. For decades, bipartisan support for Israel was a near consensus position. That consensus is fracturing, particularly among younger Democrats. Ocasio-Cortez stands at the forefront of that generational shift. 2026, 2028, and ambition. Political observers inevitably connect high-profile international appearances to future ambitions. Whether or not Ocasio-Cortez harbors presidential aspirations, appearances at global forums elevate national profits, so do controversial statements. Bold rhetoric energizes base supporters. It also alienates opponents. If she intends to compete on a national stage beyond her district, the genocide accusation will follow her. Voters beyond progressive enclaves may view such language differently. The responsibility of elected office. There is a difference between activism and governance. Members of Congress wield influence that extends beyond social media. Their words are cited by foreign governments, amplified by adversaries, and scrutinized by allies. Precision is not optional. It is a responsibility. Criticizing Israeli policy is legitimate. Questioning proportionality is legitimate. Debating aid conditions is legitimate. accusing genocide is a different category altogether. It is the highest form of moral condemnation available in international law. To use it requires extraordinary evidence. A debate worth having without hyperbole. The Israel-Hamas war raised profound moral and legal questions: civilian protection, humanitarian access, hostage recovery, long-term political solutions. These debates deserve seriousness. But seriousness requires discipline. When rhetoric outruns evidence, it inflames rather than illuminates. If Ocasio-Cortez intended to provoke a global conversation, she succeeded. But provocation is not the same as persuasion. And in Munich, a city synonymous with the origins of the Holocaust, words about genocide carry an even heavier burden. Conclusion: the line between critique and indictment. The core question is not whether Israel's war deserves scrutiny. All wars do. The question is whether labeling it genocide advances justice or distorts it. Genocide is not a synonym for tragedy. It is not a synonym for destruction. It is not a synonym for civilian suffering. It is a specific crime defined by specific intent. In Munich, Representative Ocasio-Cortez crossed a rhetorical line that many Americans, and many legal scholars, believe should not be crossed lightly. History demands caution. Law demands precision. Leadership demands restraint. In a world already on edge, words can either clarify or combust. In Munich, the accusation of genocide did not clarify. It ignited.